Hey friend, welcome to Girls Night, your home as you navigate the everything era. That wildly overwhelming decade where you have to make all your biggest decisions all at once. Should you take that job that requires moving across the country? Is this relationship going anywhere or are you wasting your time? Should you freeze your eggs? How do you know if you're ready for kids? What if you marry the wrong person? Are you going to meet anyone at all? You're supposed to have this figured out by now, right? Friend, if you are constantly second-guessing yourself while you're scrolling through everyone else's highlight reels, if you're fielding questions about your timeline at family dinners, if you're staring at your ceiling at 2 a.m. wondering if you're making the right choices, both big ones and small ones, you've found your people. Girls Night is for you. Hi, I'm Stephanie Mae Wilson, and I'm an author, a TEDx speaker, and your host here at Girls Night. And I have been exactly where you are. Building the plane while flying it, feeling like everyone else got a manual for this stage of life except for me. But over the last 12 years or so, I've worked so hard to put together a life that I really love. And now I'm on a mission to help you do the same. Not create a life that looks like mine, but create a life that looks like you. On Girls Night, you will get my hard-won wisdom from the process I went through, including all of the messy middle parts, and there have been a lot of them. Plus, conversations with incredible experts who answer the exact questions you're Googling at 2 a.m. Not fluffy advice about trusting the process or you'll just know when you know, but real practical guidance for your real complicated life. Well, today's episode is coming to you from a very particular moment that I'm in my life right now. Almost exactly a year ago, my best friend Kelsey and I got to live out a lifelong dream of moving to Spain together with our families. It's something that we have been dreaming about for, no joke, 15 years, and against all the odds, we actually did it. This year has been incredible. I live on a rooftop in Granada, Spain, which is truly one of the most beautiful cities in Spain. The city, if you've never seen a picture of it, take your mental picture of like classic southern Spain and mix it together with your mental picture of Tuscany and Morocco. And that's what Granada looks like. I love it here. So not only have I gotten to live in Spain this year, but I've gotten to live a 9-minute walk away from my best friend and her family, which has been a total dream come true after 12 years of living across the country from each other. And together, our two families have had the privilege of traveling a ton. We have spent time in 11 different countries this year. 11. We've had so much fun, learned so much, experienced so much, and I will just never get over the gift that this year has been. P.S. Listen to last week's episode to hear Kelsey's side of the story and to hear what our individual families are up to next. But here's what I want to tell you about. It's the night before we left for Spain, almost exactly a year ago. I was lying in the guest bedroom at my brother and sister-in-law's house in Chicago, and I was panicking. We had a middle of the night flight. We were leaving in just a few hours. I'm laying in the dark, and I am truly losing it. I was standing at the edge of such a huge move that would not only change my life, but also my husband's life, who was asleep next to me, and the lives of our 3-year-old twins who were sleeping in the next room. I was in a cold sweat as I was thinking, what have we done? In that moment, I didn't feel like a confident adult woman who can make decisions about her life. I felt about 2 inches tall and 2 years old standing next to this huge life change. I was laying there and I had tears running down my cheeks, and I truly was second-guessing everything. Had we made a terrible mistake? Were we ruining our kids' lives? Was I being irresponsible with our family's future? There's a reason that most people don't do things like this. Actually, there are probably a million reasons. And at that moment, if I could have pressed the eject button on the whole thing, I would have. But our house was already rented out, our cars were already sold, our girls were already pulled out of school, the tickets were purchased, our bags were packed, and we were supposed to be heading to the airport in just a few hours. It was too late to call it off. And I'm so glad, because here's the thing. If I had listened to that voice, that scared, small, middle-of-the-night voice, if I had let that second-guessing convince me to call this thing off, we would have missed out on one of the most incredible years of all of our lives. And so today, I want to talk to you about why we second-guess our best decisions and how understanding your emotional patterns can help you stop letting fear masquerade as wisdom. So let me ask you something. Have you ever made a decision that you knew was right, but then immediately started second-guessing yourself the moment things got uncomfortable? Maybe you broke up with someone who wasn't right for you, but then you felt so sad afterwards that you wondered if you made a mistake. Or maybe you started a new job that you were excited about, but the first few weeks were so overwhelming that you missed the comfort of your old job and wondered if you should have stayed. Maybe you moved to a new city for better opportunities, but felt so lonely at first that you questioned whether or not you should have left home at all. This is what I call the second guessing trap, and it is absolutely everywhere in our everything era. So here's what happens. You make a thoughtful decision based on your values, your goals, and your best judgment. But then the natural emotional consequences of that decision kick in: fear, sadness, discomfort, uncertainty. And suddenly you think those feelings mean you made the wrong choice. But here's what I've learned. Those uncomfortable feelings don't mean you made the wrong decision. They usually just mean you made a big decision. Think about it. Every significant choice involves loss. When you choose one thing, you're not choosing something else. When you commit to a relationship, you're giving up the freedom of being single. When you take a new job, you're leaving the familiar comfort of your old one. When you move somewhere new, you're leaving behind the place that you know. The sadness, fear, and discomfort that follow big decisions aren't signs that you chose wrong. They're signs that you chose something that matters. But we've been taught to interpret any negative emotion as a red flag. We think that if we're feeling uncertain or uncomfortable, it must mean we're on the wrong path. People ask, do you have peace about this decision? And if our emotional reaction is anything but complete tranquility, that feels like a sign that we've made a mistake. And so we second guess decisions that were actually perfectly good, and sometimes we even reverse them. I see this all the time with women in our community. They'll break up with someone who wasn't treating them well, but then feel so lonely and miss that person so much, they'll convince themselves that they should get back together. Or they'll quit a job that was making them truly miserable, but then feel so scared about their future that they'll think they made a mistake. One of the biggest reasons that so many of us have a hard time making positive change in our life is because it doesn't always feel that positive in the moment to do so. The problem isn't that we're making bad decisions. The problem is that we don't understand our emotional patterns well enough to distinguish between this feels hard because it's wrong and this feels hard because it's new. So let me tell you why this happens and how understanding your patterns can change everything. So here's something that took me years to understand. Emotions are information, but they're not always an accurate indicator about whether or not we made the right choice. Let me give you some examples of how this shows up. So when you end a relationship that wasn't working, for example, you feel incredibly sad afterwards. That sadness is real and it's valid. You're grieving the end of something that mattered to you, the loss of someone that mattered to you, even if it wasn't the right fit. But it's easy to interpret that sadness as, I made a mistake, instead of, I'm processing a loss. Or when you start a new job, for example, you feel overwhelmed and miss the ease of your old routine. That discomfort is real. You're learning new systems, building new relationships, proving yourself all over again, figuring out where to park and where you eat lunch. It's a lot. It has some middle school lunchroom energy for sure. And it would be easy to interpret that stress as, this job was wrong for me, instead of, I'm adjusting to something new. Or when you move to a new place, you feel lonely and you feel homesick. Of course you do. Those feelings are completely natural. You've left your familiar community and you haven't built a new one yet, but it could be easy to interpret that loneliness as, I shouldn't have moved, instead of, I just haven't found my people here yet. Or when you set boundaries with family or friends, you may feel guilty or worry that you're being selfish. That guilt makes sense. You're changing patterns that have existed for years, and change feels uncomfortable. It might feel uncomfortable for you and for the person you're setting boundaries with. And it could be really easy to interpret that guilt as, boundaries are bad, instead of, this is just what growth feels like. The key insight is this: the emotional aftermath of a decision does not accurately indicate the rightness or wrongness of that decision. Here's another way to say that. You may not feel good after you make a good decision, but that doesn't make it a bad decision. But here's where this gets tricky. Sometimes those uncomfortable feelings are signs that you need to adjust course. Sometimes anxiety is your brain and your body telling you that something's off. Sometimes sadness is a sign that you're not honoring your values. So how do you know the difference between this feels hard because it's wrong and this feels hard because it's new? For me, an incredibly helpful key has been knowing my own patterns. So this is where self-knowledge becomes absolutely crucial. When you understand your typical emotional responses to big decisions, you can give those feelings context instead of letting them panic you. I want to share some of my patterns with you because recognizing them has completely changed how I navigate major decisions. And I'm also leaning on these things really hard right now. So here's pattern one. I always get scared before big leaps. That night before we left for Spain, the true terror I felt that before every major positive change in my life. Before I got married, before we bought our house, before I started my business, before every book has come out, before I've taught any course that I teach, before my TEDx talk last year, before every big trip or move. And I used to think that fear meant I was making a mistake. Now I just know it means I'm about to do something brave. So here's the second pattern of mine, and I'm feeling this one a lot right now. I get nostalgic and even a little bit resentful during transitions. When I'm leaving something good for something else that's also good, I get super nostalgic about what it is that I'm leaving and almost resentful about the thing that I'm moving towards, even when I chose it and genuinely want it. It's almost like I blame the new thing for taking away the old thing. And knowing this pattern about myself has helped me give these feelings a hug and not the steering wheel in my life. So here's pattern 3. I doubt myself the most when I'm tired or hungry or hormonal. I've learned that my confidence in my decisions fluctuates massively with my energy levels and my cycle. When I'm premenstrual or hungry or exhausted, everything feels harder, and I question choices that I felt great about just days before. Now, when I start second-guessing myself, I check, when did I last eat? How much sleep did I get? Where am I in my cycle? It helps so much. And here's pattern number 4. I don't make my best decisions when I'm upset. Honestly, I don't know if anybody does. When I'm upset about something, I need space to process. I need to say all the things I'm thinking. I need to let them out instead of trying to keep them bottled up inside. But that is not the moment when I make my best decisions. I make my best decisions after a long walk and a good sleep and a conversation with a best friend. I make my best decisions once I've had time to sit on them, not when I'm upset. And so here's what changed for me when I started to recognize these patterns. I stopped letting temporary emotional states override thoughtful decisions that I'd made from a clear headspace. That night before Spain, when I was terrified and second-guessing everything, I was able to say to myself, oh, this is normal. This is how I felt before I do anything scary. I know this feeling. I've felt it before every good decision I've ever made, and it doesn't mean I'm making a mistake. It means I'm doing something brave. And of course, this year in Spain has been absolutely incredible. If I had let that fear convince me to call it off, I would have missed out on something so beautiful because I just didn't understand my own patterns. Okay, let's get practical about how this applies to some specific decisions you might be facing right now. Career decisions, for example. Maybe you're considering a big job change or thinking about going back to school or thinking about starting a business. You might feel really excited about the opportunity, but then get really overwhelmed thinking about everything that could go wrong. In moments like that, it's really easy to think, okay, this means that this isn't right for me, or this means I'm not ready. I've felt that a lot throughout the years. But the reality check is, most people feel that way when they're making a big career decision. So ask yourself, is this a pattern that's normal for me? How do I normally feel when I'm making a big change like this? Seeing that pattern in your life can help show you that this is just how it goes for you. This isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. Or maybe you're thinking about ending a relationship that isn't working, or you're scared to commit to someone who really is working. These decisions often come with intense emotions that can really cloud your judgment. So here's a common pattern that you might see in yourself. After ending a relationship, you might feel so sad that you start to think you made a mistake. Or before committing to someone, you might be so scared of getting hurt that you convince yourself they're not right. Ask yourself what your typical response is to relationship changes. Do you always feel sad after breakups, even when you initiated them for good reasons? I did. Or do you always get scared before deepening intimacy, even with people you really love? Again, I can relate to that. Seeing those patterns can help you decide what is actually true and what's maybe a red flag and what's just the fact that this is hard and you're processing the change that you're about to go through. Maybe you're thinking about moving for a job or for a partner or moving back home. Location changes always involve grief for what you're leaving, even when you're excited about where you're going. A common pattern that you might see in yourself is you feel really homesick or lonely in the first few months somewhere new, and you might interpret that as, I shouldn't have moved. But ask yourself, how long does it usually take for you to feel settled in a new place? Do you always miss home at first, even when you're happy with the choice to leave? Keep that in mind. And then the last one I want to talk about is family planning decisions. Maybe you're trying to decide about having kids or freezing your eggs or timing a pregnancy. These decisions can bring up intense anxiety about your future and about your readiness. And a common pattern is you feel overwhelmed thinking about how much your life is about to change. And you might interpret that as, I'm not ready. But here's a way to kind of reality check yourself. Do you always feel overwhelmed when you think about major life changes? Or is this a specific anxiety about parenthood that deserves some attention? The key is learning to distinguish between emotions that are giving you important information and emotions that are just your standard response to change. Here are some questions that have really helped me. I ask myself, is this feeling familiar? Have I felt this way with other big decisions? Am I making this decision from a calm, clear headspace, or am I in the middle of an intense emotion? What would I advise a friend to do that might be in a similar situation? What were my reasons for this choice when I made it, and do those reasons still make sense? And then the last one is, am I giving myself enough time to adjust, or am I expecting to feel good about big changes immediately? So I want to share with you some of the research behind why understanding your emotional patterns is so crucial for good decision making. This isn't just like touchy-feely might help a little bit advice. This is backed by solid science and solid psychology. So the first reason is that emotional awareness improves your mental health. Studies show that people who can accurately identify and name their emotions have lower levels of anxiety and depression. When you can recognize, I'm feeling overwhelmed because I'm adjusting to something new, versus I'm feeling overwhelmed because I made a huge mistake, you reduce the secondary anxiety that comes from not understanding your own reactions. You don't end up being anxious about your anxiety. Ever felt that way? I definitely have. The second reason this is important is that it builds resistance. Research on emotional regulation shows that people who understand their emotional patterns bounce back from setbacks faster. They don't get derailed by temporary difficult feelings because they know those feelings are going to pass. The third reason is that it improves relationships. When you can communicate your patterns to others, like, I always get quiet when I'm processing big emotions, but that doesn't mean I'm mad at you, people can support you more effectively. You stop having the same fights over and over again because people actually understand what your reactions mean. And the fifth reason is that it leads to better decisions. Studies on decision-making show that people who can separate their emotional state from their evaluation of their choices make more consistent, values-based decisions. They don't flip-flop based on their mood. My best friend Kelsey, who is a brilliant therapist, explains it this way. She says, when you can put words to what you're feeling and recognize it as a pattern, you take away its power to control you unconsciously. This concept is so powerful that it's actually where we start in the course that Kelsey and I just created together called Becoming Mama. When Kelsey told me that she wanted to start our motherhood preparation course with emotional awareness, I was curious, like, why not budgets or nursery setup or timing or what doctor's appointments you need to schedule? Well, she taught me the best gift you can give your child is a parent who has done their own emotional work. And knowing how to process your big feelings is a huge part of that. Something we talk about a lot in Becoming Mama is that we dive deep into identifying your emotional inheritance. That's the patterns and responses and triggers that you inherited from your own upbringing. And we talk about how that might show up in parenting. In the course, Kelsey teaches these really incredible therapeutic techniques that help us process and heal from old wounds and strategies we can use to respond rather than react in moments where our kids do something that's really triggering to us. Because here's the truth. Whatever emotional patterns and trauma responses and unresolved issues you bring into parenthood are likely going to be passed down to your child. But when you do this foundational work, you're not just preparing for a baby, you're healing a family line. You're creating the opportunity for your child to grow up with a more secure attachment, healthier emotional regulation, and a stronger sense of self than you may have experienced. If you're thinking about becoming a mom or trying to get pregnant or currently pregnant, Becoming Mama is a fantastic resource for you. It really will help prepare you emotionally, physically, and mentally, and practically for the real experience of motherhood. Because understanding your patterns isn't just crucial for your everything era decisions, it's truly generation changing for your family. Think about my Spain example. If I hadn't recognized my pre-leap terror as a pattern, that fear would have controlled my decision on whether or not my whole family went to Spain. I might have called off the whole trip and told myself I was being wise or cautious when really I was just letting an old emotional pattern run the show. And that's what I would have been modeling for my kids as well. But because I could name it, this is my pre-leap terror. It happens before every big change. It doesn't mean I'm making a mistake. I could choose to act based on my values and my goals and what we want to be, who we want to be as a family, rather than my temporary emotional state. Emotional maturity is not the absence of difficult feelings, but is the ability to experience those feelings without being controlled by them. So let's get specific about how you can start to use this in your own life. I want to give you a step-by-step plan for understanding your decision-making patterns so you can use that knowledge to make choices with more confidence. So if you have one, grab a journal, grab a notebook, piece of paper, and a pen. All right, step 1, we're going to map your decision history. I want you to think back to the last 3 to 5 major decisions you've made. And for each one, write down a few things. 1, what was that decision? 2, how did you feel right before making it? 3, how did you feel immediately after making it? 4, how do you feel a month later? And then 5, how do you feel about it now? So then look for some patterns. Do you always feel anxious before big changes? Do you always second guess yourself in the first few weeks? Do you always feel nostalgic for what you're leaving behind? Now, here's step 2. We're going to identify your decision-making sweet spot. Think through for a second. When do you make your best decisions? Are you clearest in the morning, after you've exercised, when you're well rested, when you've had the chance to talk it through with someone? Also, identify when you make your worst decisions. Is it when you're stressed, when you're hungry, right after an emotional conversation? Plan to make your most important choices during your sweet spot times and avoid making them during your vulnerable times. All right, here's number 3. Create pattern reminders. Based on what you've learned about yourself, create some reminders that you can use when you're in the middle of second-guessing a decision. For example, I always feel scared right before big changes, but that fear has never been a good predictor of whether the change was right. Or I always miss my old situation for the first month in any new situation, even if the new situation is better. Or I always doubt my decisions or my competence or my relationships when I'm at a certain place in my cycle. Write these down and keep them somewhere where you can access them when you need them. And then here's step 4. Build in adjustment time. We have to stop expecting ourselves to feel good about big decisions immediately. Most significant changes require an adjustment period where you feel uncomfortable, uncertain, or sad. That's normal, not a sign that you've chosen poorly. We need to build this expectation into your decision-making process. So when you're considering a big change, ask yourself, am I prepared for this to feel hard at first? And what support will I need during the adjustment period? Now, just a note here, depending on the decision you've just made, the adjustment period might not be short. For me, it always takes like 6 months or so before I feel settled in a new job. And I can also look back on several breakups that I had throughout my life and see that it took me well over a year to heal and fully move on from that relationship, even though the person was absolutely not right for me. So know that this adjustment period could be a few days or it could be way longer. If it's way longer, you still haven't made the wrong decision. It just means it's an adjustment. Okay, here's number 5. Create a support communication plan. Figure out how to communicate your patterns to the people who matter most in your life. This might sound like, I tend to second guess my decisions for the first few weeks after making them, even when they're good decisions. So if I start spiraling about this choice, can you please remind me of why I made it? Or maybe I get really emotional when I'm processing big changes. If I seem upset, it's not that I'm upset with you, I just am working through my feelings. And the last one, step 6, practice the 24-hour rule. When you catch yourself second-guessing a decision, especially one that you made thoughtfully, give yourself at least 24 hours before acting on doubt. Often the urge to reverse course will pass once you remember your patterns and give your emotions time to settle. So use that 24 hours to ask yourself, is this doubt giving me new information I didn't have before? Or is this just my typical response to big changes? So before we wrap up, I have something really exciting to share with you, and it's something I've been thinking about for months, speaking of decisions, and finally decided to do. If you've been part of my corner of the internet for a while, you know that I teach 3 main courses that have helped thousands of women navigate their everything era with more confidence and clarity. For the last 10 years, I've only opened these courses or registration for the courses once or twice a year. And that meant that if you were struggling with something in March, for example, and my course didn't open until September, you just had to wait to get the help that you needed. So I've made a big decision. Starting today and for the foreseeable future, I'm keeping all 3 courses open and available year-round. If you need help with your single life or your new marriage or preparing for motherhood, I don't want you to have to wait. So let me tell you about each course. Love Your Single Life is for the woman who's tired of feeling like her real life is on hold until she meets someone. This 4-week course will help you savor, enjoy, and truly make the most of your single season while setting yourself up for an incredible relationship in the future. It's about transforming a season of waiting into a season of passion and purpose and preparation. If you're single and you want to love this season of your life instead of just enduring it, and also be set up for an awesome relationship when the time comes, this course is for you. So the second course I teach is called Just Married, and I teach this course with my husband, Carl, and it's for couples in their first several years of marriage. In this course, we'll help you get on the same page in 6 of the trickiest and most important areas of marriage: money, sex, family, communication, conflict, and creating a shared vision for your life together. Very few couples stumble into a life and a marriage that they love. And so this course will help you build a roadmap to get there. If you want to lay a strong, solid foundation for your marriage and your future family, then this one is for you. And then last but not least, Becoming Mama. This is the course that Kelsey and I just finished putting together, and it is a complete, research-backed, heart-centered preparation for the real experience of becoming a mom. Whether you're planning or you're trying or you're already pregnant, this course prepares you mentally, emotionally, physically, and practically for motherhood. We'll cover everything from understanding your emotional inheritance to preparing your body, your relationships, and your career for this massive transition. Here's the thing, your everything era is happening right now. The questions you're asking and decisions you're making about love and marriage and career and family aren't going to wait for the perfect time to come up. And so I don't want my help to have to wait either. If any of these courses sound like what you're needing right now, I would be so honored to walk through this season with you. You can check them all out at stephaniemaywilson.com, and I'll put the direct links in the show notes as well. I created these courses because I remember what it feels like to be in your shoes, making huge decisions without a roadmap, wondering if I was doing any of it right. These courses are the guidance that I wish I had, and I'm so excited that they're available now whenever you need them. So here's what I want you to remember. Second guessing your decisions isn't a character flaw, and it doesn't mean that you're bad at making choices. It just means that you're human and you're making decisions that matter. The goal isn't to eliminate all doubt or negative emotions around your choices. The goal is to understand your patterns well enough that you don't let temporary emotional states override thoughtful decisions you've made from a clear headspace. Right now, as we're wrapping up this beautiful year in Spain, as I'm preparing to go back home to the US for the summer and then come back to Spain in September, I'm using everything that I know about myself to get me through everything I know I'm about to feel. I know I'm going to feel really sad as I leave Spain. And even though I'm excited to see my family, I know it's going to be kind of disorienting for the first few days. I know it's going to take me a while to get reacclimated and to be able to really connect with them. I also know that I'm going to be second guessing our decision to come back to Spain as we're saying goodbye to everyone in August. But I also know that these feelings are part of my process. They're not signs that we're making the wrong choices. And that knowledge helps me move through the emotions without being controlled by them. This is what I want for you: the confidence to make thoughtful decisions and wisdom to trust them, even when the inevitable discomfort of change makes you want to second guess yourself. Start paying attention to your patterns. Start naming what you're feeling and why. Again, we'll teach you how to do this like step by step in becoming mama. Start building in adjustment time for big changes and start trusting that you're more capable of making good decisions than your anxious moments would have you believe. You're going to figure this out, friend. You can do this. And I'm in your corner every step of the way. All right, friend, that's it for today's episode of Girls Night. Before you go, would you do me a favor and take one quick second to leave a rating and a review for the podcast in your favorite podcast app? It would take maybe 15 seconds, but it would make a huge difference for the show, and it would mean so much to me. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week for another episode of Girls Night. Talk to you then.